I think it was me too. I don't think I did. Yeah, I did. Jean, can you hear us? Sound check.
Yes, I can.
Thank you.
Hey, well, it's 6 o'clock, so let's go ahead and get started. This is going to be a city council meeting of the Lake Stevens City Council. It's September 20th, 2022. It's 6 p.m. This meeting is at the Mill downtown Lake Stevens, as well as online. The video of which will be later posted on our YouTube site. And with that, I'm going to call the meeting to order and ask all to rise for the pledge of allegiance. Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Clerk Schoen, can we get a roll call, please?
Councilmember Daughtry, I understand he's on his way, correct? Okay, he's on his way. Councilmember Peter Shagan,
Present.
Councilmember Frederick, Councilmember Dickinson,
Present.
Councilmember Jorstad,
Present.
Councilmember Ewing,
Present.
Councilmember Tagent.
Okay, can we get, did Kim say how long?
He said 5 to 6 minutes.
Okay, let's go ahead and excuse him for now in case something, in case something pops up, and as well as Sean.
I'll make a motion to excuse council.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you very much. And let's move forward with guest business.
Kelly, can you get Shannon and Kathy and Shannon in, our consultants?
Anya, how long do you think this is going to take?
Depends on discussion, but the presentation should be pretty brief. I'd say like 15, 20 minutes or so.
So actually, what we need to do is get a, it's not on here, accept the agenda. And President Ewing, I would ask that we move guest business to below city department updates so that people in the audience who don't wish to hear about the survey can moves.
So move item 4 to item between item 6 and 7.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Any discussion from council? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, Mayor, you're, I guess that was on the modification to the agenda. Any other adjustments to the agenda? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
Some,
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, Mayor, you have an agenda.
Great, thank you. So with that, let's move to citizens' comments. And how we do citizens' comments in this format is we ask for anybody online who may be online to raise their digital hand and let us know that they are wanting to provide citizens' comments during this. And then we ask as well in the audience if there's anyone who wishes to provide citizens' comments, do a green sheet if we have any. You get 3 minutes to address the council on whatever topic. And is there anybody online who wishes to provide citizens' comment?
No, and no green sheets either.
And no green sheets. Is there anyone who did not know about the green sheets who wishes to provide citizens' comment? I'm not seeing any. So with that, we'll move forward with city department updates. Chief.
Thank you, Mayor, Council President, appreciate your time tonight. I'm going to introduce and promote an individual tonight, so I'm very excited. Mayor, I'll have you come forward with the word in the officers. I'm first going to introduce Chad Wells. Chad has been with us for some time. Chad started his law enforcement career in corrections with the King County Adult and Snohomish County Juvenile from 1998 to 2004. Chad then started with Granite Falls PD as a reserve officer in 2006, and then was hired full-time in November 2007. Chad came to Lake Stevens Police Department in 2014. Chad has a grand total of a little over 21 years in criminal justice field, 15 plus years in law enforcement, and 5 to 6 in corrections. During this time, Chad has served as a part of the Peer Support Team in the Bike Patrol, Crisis and Hostage Negotiator, Field Training Officer, Squad Leader, and as a corporal. Chad is also an instructor for tactical patrol tactics, crisis intervention, de-escalation, pistol, rifle, taser, pulse shield, first aid, Narcan, radar, lidar, and report writing. Chad has been married for 26 years, celebrating his anniversary recently, and they have 2 growing, Chad calls them kiddos. I want to congratulate Chad, who was promoted on September 16, 2023, to Sergeant in Cyber Patrol. I look forward to his leadership in our department. Chad, if you can briefly introduce your family and find versus.
So my son is Noah and my daughter Hannah. And my wife is Karen. She's good.
He's daddy. Chad Wells.
I, Chad Wells,
Do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear and affirm
that I will support and defend the Constitution
that I will support and defend the Constitution
and laws of the United States,
and laws of the United States,
the Constitution and laws
the Constitution and laws
of the State of Washington,
of the State of Washington,
the ordinances of the City of Lake Stevens,
the ordinance of the City of Lake Stevens,
and the mission and regulations of Lake Stevens Police Department,
the missions and regulations of the Lake Stevens Police Department.
and I will faithfully
And I will faithfully
and impartially perform
and impartially
and
perform
discharge the duties
and discharge the duties
of the Lake Stevens Police Sergeant
of the Lake Stevens Police Sergeant
according to law and to the best of my ability.
according to law and the best of my ability.
Your second.
Thanks.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, boss. As you promote one, you gotta fill the backfill. So I'm lucky that today that I get to provide you with somebody that's gonna backfill. Joshua Tannen, you can come forward. This is Joshua Tannen. Joshua was born in Carlisle, Pennsylvania in November of 1978. Josh's father was an officer in the United States Army and then moved every 3 years. Josh left the home at 17 years old, moving to Tulsa, Oklahoma. In October of 2000, Josh attended the American Motorcycle Institute in Daytona Beach, Florida, earning a technical certificate in motorcycle repair, specializing in Ducati. I'm sorry. Joshua then moved to Anchorage, Alaska in 2001, working in a motorcycle shop there. In March of 2002, Josh's friend's mother had a massive heart attack and he moved back to San Antonio, where he worked at a motorcycle shop in San Antonio for a few years. In 2006, Joshua moved to Las Vegas with an intent of becoming a police officer. Jumped up. Sorry, that's what happens. Josh, while he was in Vegas, earned his GED from Dixie State College in Utah and also joined the Army National Guard, subsequently moving back to San Antonio in 2007. Joshua left the National Guard in October of 2008 to attend San Antonio Community College. In January of 2009, Joshua entered the San Antonio College Law Enforcement Training Academy, where he earned his peace officer certification. Later, he entered college at Hallmark University in April of 2018. He graduated in July of 2019, summa. There you go. With his AAS in power plant technology and his AAS in airframe technology. His law enforcement career includes being a 2006 Bexar. Did I say Bexar? Bear. Wow. That's a different. Yeah, that's Texas. County Constable Precinct 4 as a non-paid regular commissioned deputy, and then moved to Welder Police Department in the same capacity. He returned to Bear County Constable's Precinct 4, where he served as a traffic officer until 2016. He was then hired by Kirby Police Department as a patrol officer, remaining there until March of 2019. He made a great choice in 2019 when his life changed. He became an airframe and power plant licensed from FAA and moved to Lake Stevens, Washington, being hired by Boeing and was assigned to the Everett plant. Joshua worked for Boeing until August 2020 and was laid, let's see here. Sorry, was hired, assigned, and he was laid off due to COVID pandemic. Josh took a job for a couple months as a civic security working in Snohomish County Courthouse until he was hired by Toyota Police Department in December of 2020 and working there until August of 2022. We were happy to hire Josh yesterday with the Lake Stevens Police Department as a lateral officer. Josh, can you introduce your family with you?
Yes, this is my wife Tish, my son Blake, my daughter Danica, and my mother-in-law Pat.
Mayor, could you come forward and swear in? Now, actually, you're gonna have your wife come forward, I guess.
Yes,
Can you
my
stab you?
Your insurance company, right?
Just.
Shannon,
I, Joshua Cannon,
do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear and affirm
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution and laws of the United States,
the Constitution and laws of the United States,
the Constitution and laws of the state of Washington,
the Constitution and laws of the state of Washington,
the ordinances of the city of Lake Stevens,
the ordinances of the city of Lake Stevens,
and the mission and regulations
and the mission and regulations
of the Lake Stevens Police Department,
of the Lake Stevens Police Department,
and that I will faithfully
and that I will faithfully
and impartially perform
and impartially perform
and discharge the duties
and discharge the duties
of a Lake Stevens police officer
of the Lake Stevens Police Officer
according to law and to the best of my ability.
according to law and the best of my ability.
Thanks for bringing your family.
Josh is currently going through his orientation, and he'll be signed at field training next week, and then hopefully get him on the road by November. Thank you, appreciate it.
Department updates. I know all the department heads have been busy, knows the grindstone, working on budget stuff, so. Good stuff. All right, so with that, I would like to just say thank you to the families who come. I enjoy seeing the families. They're truly the backbone of the folks that are here, work here at the city, and it's because of you that we have great folks who like to come to work here, hopefully, and enjoy their time here. But we very much value the families that are behind us. So thank you for being here. With that, let's go to item number 4, guest business. Fine.
All right, back on. Hear me? Council, this evening, I'd like to bring back Compensation Connections. They started a salary survey for us in July, and they are here today to present to you the preliminary results in an overview and talk about what they found. And at the end of their presentation, we'll talk about budget implications and hopefully get some direction from the council on where to go next with the survey. We will bring back more information on the survey at another budget meeting in the future also. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Shannon and Kathy again.
Right. Thanks, Anya, and good evening, everyone. Kathy and I are delighted to be here once again. Shall I share my screen just so we have the presentation up for, I know everyone received it in advance.
Yes, please.
One moment.
And Shannon, if I may apologize real quick, for moving you in the agenda. We are all enthralled by what you're going to show us, but I did not think the family members would be, so. I appreciate your patience.
No worries. No worries. So For some reason, I wonder if the host can enable screen sharing for me.
Sorry, Shannon, hold on just a moment.
No worries. And we loved watching the swearing in of your officers. That is, yeah.
Okay, Shannon, give it another try if you could.
Okay, here we go. Okay. Can you see my screen? Okay.
Yes.
All right. So let's dive in. So this may be a bit of a reminder here, the first couple of slides, but in terms of the market study, what's on the screen right now are the main elements of the project, you know, the primary bodies of work that we did. So we researched the comparable market data. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. We worked with Anya to review and make some updates to the existing pay range structures so they reflect that market data. And then we also analyzed the employee pay compared to the proposed updated pay ranges, and then started working through some preliminary models to determine potential budget impacts. And Anya and Barb also have been working on that. So we'll talk more about that toward the end of the session. Okay, so what did we use for data sources? We did utilize several different municipalities' pay data for comparison purposes. You can see them all listed here. When we met last time, we talked a lot about you know, which other cities to use for comparison. And the council, you know, had suggested that we focus primarily on cities that are, you know, commutable, if you will. So within kind of the talent market for Lake Stevens. And so that is what we did. And just to call out at the end of your packet with this presentation, there is a chart that outlines more detailed information with the city demographic information. So just calling that to your attention. I am happy to go through that if you'd like, just let me know. But the information is there. Okay. And then in addition to those specific cities, we also used published survey data that helped to support and kind of reflect the larger labor market for Lake Stevens. And so we used the Economic Research Institute and the Milliman Public Employer Surveys. And those both allowed us to look at government agency pay. And then we also looked at 4 other sources, Comp Analyst, Comp Data, and 2 from Milliman, that actually have organizations from across all types of industries, because many of the jobs at Lake Stevens, you know, could be filled from folks from anywhere, not necessarily a government agency or another city. So we wanted to just, you know, look at the larger labor market. So we're reflecting that for the, you know, the city as a whole. And when we did our research and, you know, comparing the city's jobs to the other jobs at the comparator cities and in the published survey sources, just a reminder here, we really did focus on job content and qualifications. We don't necessarily just match job title to job title because, you know, some organizations use different job titles for the same body of work. So we really do focus on job content and qualifications when matching. And we'd like to, you know, say that in the compensation world, best practice is to have at least 3 matches per job. So, you know, if that's possible, and it turns out that we averaged about 9 matches per job. You know, and that's taking into account the targeted municipality pay data as well as the published survey pay data. So we really have a lot of pay data for your jobs. And then in terms of the data itself, we did scope it for Lake Stevens or Puget Sound. So anything that like in the published survey data, we made sure we were really focusing on your labor market geographically. And all of the data was aged to reflect an effective date of January 2023. And so the data that we use can sometimes have different effective dates. And so we sort of bring it together to one point in time and use that for the analysis. So that's the how, that's our process for the market study. The next couple of slides are reporting on that data, if you will. And so let me sort of orient you to what you're seeing here. So we are comparing the city's current range midpoint to 3 different sets of market data. So first of all, the current range midpoint. So every, as you know, every job is assigned into basically a pay range. And we look at the middle of that pay range as kind of the nominal comparison point for the city's pay. So we're not necessarily looking at individual employee pay yet. We're really focused on what is this job pay at the city at the middle of its range. And so that's sort of the city's reference point. And then the market reference point, we looked at 3 different percentiles of data when we did our research. So we looked at the 50th percentile, which is the median right in the middle of all of the reported data. We also looked at the 60th percentile. So when I'm talking about the 60th percentile, that means of, you know, the data that's reported, 60% of organizations are below that number in the data set. And so we looked at the 60th percentile, and then we also looked at the 75th percentile. And again, the 75th percentile, you know, 75% of the data points are below that number. And so we're sort of progressing from the middle of the data set to the 60th to the 75th. And here we're using the market data to, again, compare job by job to the city and what the city has as its range midpoint. And this helps to kind of identify, you know, where is the city paying broadly, you know, compared to the market. And so on this chart, we've got the kind of roll-up information for that listed by departments, and then the comparison there. So for example, the you know, average of all the jobs in the administration area compared to the market data is about 89% of the market. So it's you know, about 10% under the 50th percentile of the market. So that's how the chart itself works. I do want to call out 2 things that look kind of anomalous. And so under administration and finance, the 60th and 75th percentile data, we weren't able to obtain market data for all of the administration and finance jobs, data points for the 60th percentile and the 75th percentile. We did for the 50th. And so that causes kind of the average numbers to look a little skewed or a little funny here when we're looking at this, just for administration and finance for the 60th and 75th percentiles. So I hope that makes sense. I'm happy to pause and answer any questions on this chart or about that point.
I do have one quick question, just to make sure I'm clear. If current salaries were at or above the market ranges, would this chart reflect that? Would there be 100% showing that our salaries are at 100% or potentially higher than market rate? Is that
Mhm.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Absolutely. And so what we're looking at overall is, you know, at the comparing to the 50th percentile of the market data overall, the city is about 93% of market at the 50th. And, you know, 88.7% at the 60th percentile, and then 85.7% of market at the 75th percentile. And again, that's thinking about that current range midpoint. So what the job pays at the midpoint of the range. Individual employee pay may be, you know, different than that range midpoint. Are there any other questions on this piece? Okay, and I'll move on to the next slide. So this is just a reminder, if you will, on the city's current policy related to implementing adjustments based on market studies. And so just really calling out here that, you know, in general, the city's policy has been that, you know, if an employee whose existing classification is moved to a higher salary range, then they'll move to the same step within their new salary range. And so that comes into play with the next piece of information we're going to look at, which is, you know, some implementation options related to this market data. Okay. So I'll walk us through this chart, and then we can go from there in terms of questions. So let's focus on the blue part for the moment. So we worked with Anya to develop a few different options for, you know, implementing the market data, and all of this is all preliminary for discussion. So one option is to bring any employees who happen to fall below the dollar amount of the new step one for their proposed pay range. So anyone who's below step one, just bring them on to step one of the proposed pay range. And we have kind of three numbers there, again, looking at the 50th percentile, the 60th percentile, and the 75th percentile. And what that's basically doing is we created draft pay ranges that three different versions that are anchored in the 50th percentile, which means that the midpoint of the range kind of aligns with that 50th percentile of the market data. And then we created another version of a pay range structure where we're anchoring on the 60th percentile. So being a little more aggressive in that market competitiveness, and again, aligning the ranges with the 60th percentile. And then, you know, the third option where we have anchored the ranges to the 75th percentile. So the middle of the ranges are consistent with the 75th percentile of the market data. So we did sort of three versions of these for comparison purposes. So if under the model that is using the 50th percentile, bringing anyone who's below step one onto step one would be a little over $110,000 or 2.4% of salaries. And that cost and the rest of the numbers that you see here don't include anything related to increased costs related to payroll taxes or benefits and things like that. So these numbers are focused on salary costs or wage costs. Okay, so first option is bring to step one. Second option is bring to next higher step. So sometimes when we do this modeling, some employees end up just their current pay ends up kind of falling between steps. And so with this option, anyone whose pay has fallen kind of between steps would just move to the next higher step. And that also includes anyone who's below step 1. So that's a combined model. And then the third option, which is reflective of the city's current policy, is to bring folks to the current step in their range. If there's no range change for them, then there's no, there's no change in terms of step placement or anything like that. But here we're just bringing people to the current step in their new range. And you can see the difference around that related to, is that range anchored in the 50th percentile of the market, the 60th, or the 75th percentile of the market. And then that fourth option is places employees on a step based on their years in the position. And so, we worked with Anya and just came up with a preliminary kind of view into that. So basically, someone's been in their position 1 to 2 years, they'd be at step 1. If they've been in their position, 2 to 3 years, they'd be at step 2, and so on. So kind of looking at it that way. And so based on that type of analysis, you can see, again, we're looking at, varying costs depending upon the market percentile pay range that we're using for comparison here. So that's everything in the blue. And it's looking at, the blue is looking at all of the jobs, all of the employees within the city. And the gray has the same options and the same percentiles, you can see. So that process is the same. It's just that the gray numbers include only jobs that have a difference of more than 5% from market. So if the job is 6% below market, then it would be folded into the analysis, and the employee or employees in that job would be included in the gray numbers. So jobs that are within 5% of the market data, employees in those jobs may not necessarily see a pay change with this model, with the gray. So I'm going to pause. That was a lot, I know, that I went through. And so just to see what questions or comments you all may have.
I have a question for Anya. Can you remind me approximately what the percentage of benefits cost is? What percentage of salary?
We approximate 40%.
Okay. Thank you.
Shannon, when we look at these numbers, I know that you projected these numbers to January 1 of 23. Does that include any cost of living?
It does not. So this is market, think of it as market adjustments only for these numbers.
So we would do the market adjustment, plus we would do the cost of living.
Correct.
And we'll talk more about cost of living on October 4th. And I do just want to remind council that this is for non-represented positions only. So I believe there was 49 positions that they surveyed. And at the time it was 46 staff employees affected by the survey. And I believe we've hired about 5 or 6 since then that we will incorporate. So about 52 staff total.
Will we assume that we're bringing the newest staff on it, the higher levels, as we keep changing job positions and so forth? Like Troy, some of the job positions, like, hey, let's rearrange this to a different position so we can perhaps pay higher. So wouldn't we assume that we brought the newest people in at a higher job classification?
On some positions, we've only done that on a few that I can think off the top of my head that you just brought up. But we have competed for salaries for several years. I actually just was looking at this with the finance director today on how often we have hired at step one in the last couple of years. And the trend is the average step we hire at is between step 3 and step 4. And that's since 2020. So and currently how our ranges are modeled, there's 4% in between each step of the range, and there's 7 steps in a range. So if we're looking at hiring at step 3 or 4, that's 8 to 12% above what the minimum is. I just wanted to point that out because we are we're trying to be competitive. So we are offering jobs higher than we might normally would have because we are below market.
I would say that's what I was trying to get at, is I think we're doing a higher step.
Yeah.
And changing the position hours around a little bit to be.
Which is why the years in position option could be of an appeal, because we have competed to get new employees in the door, and now we're trying to make adjustments to make sure that they stay competitive salaries. But maybe the newer staff don't need adjustments like the people that have been tenured in their position would need adjustments. If that makes sense.
Also, to Councilmember Jorstad's question, the majority of the benefits where we say it's about 40% of salaries is medical and dental, and that does not change with the salary.
Sure.
So probably half of that will increase a bit, but like I said, about 20% is salary or is medical.
Oh, that's helpful. Thank you.
Any more questions before we go into what that looks like for budget impact? And we want to go in the last slide. I know Shannon did point that last slide out. I did just want to say that the list of services there is not all-inclusive per se. It doesn't include like some utilities and we know like Arlington also has a cemetery, but those weren't really relevant to what we have in the city of Lake Stevens. So I'm going to share my screen now. If you could let me.
Oh, very good. That's fascinating.
Okay. So we'll do the first one first. You see that okay? So the first.
Yeah, do you want that?
There we go. It's hard to see when my Zoom panel is like covering some of the buttons. Okay, so this first slide is the general fund base budget. This is what Director Stevens presented previously and where we are with hitting 2029 and our 10% reserve line. And it does include the 8.6% COLA. This does. So what we've done, just for ease, we've just forecasted a couple different models just so you could see a general picture. If council were to move in the direction of the current policy, which is moving employees to the current step at the 60th percentile, right in the middle of the 3 options, that would put us down below right around 2028. The next option we forecasted was years in service or years in position at the 60th percentile, and that would put us at the end of 2028. you like me to go back? Those are the two options that we've just forecasted. What we would really like is some direction from council tonight on what their thoughts are on is the preferred target, the 50th percentile, the 60th percentile, or the 75th? And B, what implementation strategy are you comfortable, or a few implementation, maybe two, that you would like us to come forward with more concrete numbers and information on? Some of the things that we would need to still incorporate, this is the general overview. This is the raw data that came out of the survey. There are some tweaking that will need to be done. Like I mentioned, there's the 5 employees we will need to add that were brand new since July. We'll still have to look at internal equities, such as like compression. So we want to make sure that people that are supervising others, they have a compression in between the ranges on how everything was spread out in this that came out in the salary survey. And also grouping together the same positions as far as like administrative assistants, and making sure that they are still in the same range. The directors that are in the same range are staying in the same range, and those types of things. So before we started to manipulate and play with all the data and enter in more things and change things around, we wanted to get a sense of direction before, so we didn't make so many different scenarios for you all.
I have a question. Is there going to be information provided from department heads around positions, adding positions for the 2023 budget?
That'll be presented on October 4th. And we will also talk about COLA, and we can talk about the salary survey again and what that looks like with all of that.
Thank you. It's tricky for me to land on a strategy without knowing how many more positions staff are also asking to be added. So I'll stop there.
So if I'm looking at this right, what we are saying is the city's policy today and in the past has been to bring to the current step at the 60th percentile. Is that correct?
It's correct that it says in general, the city's policy has been to bring staff to the current step, not the 60th percentile though. That's not in the policy. So because there is some leeway in the policy, it says in general. I mean, I encourage that's the route that we take because it is in the policy, but you do have some leeway there on the implementation strategy, I would say. And then you also have the choice on where you want to land, the 50th, 60th, or 75th.
For me, I'm more likely to be years in position because there's a lot of people who've been here. A lot of newer people are getting hired in at higher steps. So there's a lot of people who got hired at lower steps who've been here longer, and I would hate to lose the great staff that we have in the base. So I'm more likely to look at years in position. I'm up in the air about the 50th or 60th step. Looks like the 60th step gets us to 2020. So I'd be more likely to fall in that 60th step if I were to make a decision. I think Andrew has a great point though. We got to look at how many positions and find out what the forecast looks like.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. But you're saying then, Marcus, is years in position at the 60th percentile.
That's what I would look at the very bottom under 60th
Right.
years in position. I just feel like there's probably, if people are coming in at 1 step or 2 step and they've been with us for 5 or 6 years and bring all these other people in a position 3 and 4 that we've been doing, then these people might kind of feel like, hey, we never really got to see it a step. We never got to see, and you know, they're bringing new people in, meanwhile they've been very loyal, sitting on hate to lose their knowledge base.
Marcus, can you put your mic in front of you? People are having a hard time hearing you. Thank you.
So I just reiterate, I would look at all jobs, probably years in position at the 60th percentile if I were going to look at something along those lines. But I, once again, feel like Angie made a very valid point to see where this lands us and how long it takes us out in our modeling. Sorry.
Yeah, I guess to piggyback on that, I appreciate both those comments. With the cost of living approaching double digits and FTEs, we're going to be much closer, way away from 29. We're not going to be anywhere close to 29.
This includes the COLA.
That does include the COLA.
Yes.
Okay.
The base budget includes the COLA,
Okay.
and then I also added the COLA to those increases.
Okay. So yeah, if we know how many FTEs are being asked for, from department heads and such, so.
Anya, did you, excuse me, did you say you were, based on this projection, you were looking at an 8.5% COLA increase every year?
No, just for 2023.
Oh, okay.
I didn't catch that part.
And we'll talk more about the cost of living CPIW when we come back on the 4th. Right now, our current base is set at 90% of CPIW. And so Director Morrington will talk more about other jurisdictions that might be doing more or different levels. And so the biggest thing is we don't want to get too far behind doing any of these things that will run into this again in the future.
I have a question. So this is 49 of the roughly 110. So we have roughly 60 positions that are represented. And do we have any idea how these negotiations will impact those that are represented, and at what point will we have that conversation?
Are you talking the Teamsters negotiations that are under negotiations, or all the rest of the units?
Well, all the units. I know, I believe the police are up next year. And I don't know where we're at with the Teamsters. I know we have them on different schedules.
So during negotiations, we do market analysis for the represented positions almost every negotiation cycle. There is nothing in place in our policy that has us do market studies for non-represented staff. And I believe the last one that has been done for all non-represented staff has been since 2013 or 14 from my records. So as far as keeping up with the market for represented positions, we've been doing very well because we've been negotiating and doing market adjustments and on top of COLAs every year for represented staff. I mean, we are in negotiations with Teamsters this year. We're not sure like what that's going to do yet or what's going to happen there. And then police will be in negotiations next year. You're right. But we do look at that every negotiation cycle for them as well.
Thank you.
And the majority of the public works staff will come out of street and storm fund. Not as many of them come out of the general fund. That is the park people will come out of the general fund, but the public works will generally most come out of street and stormwater.
And I don't need a decision tonight. We're not taking action. This is just to get a gauge on where you're feeling we should land so we can fine tune the salary server. We can bring back more concrete numbers again. So I've heard 60th percentile years of service from one. I know Councilmember Jorstad and Ewing would like more information on the positions, and we'll bring that back on October 4th. Is there anybody else that has any? Go ahead.
It might be too onerous, but I like Marcus's consideration, but I just don't know where people came in at and where they're at, because I know that is a reality. You know, someone's been here 5 years and someone comes in the same range as they are, and the person's been here 5 years, that might be challenging for them. So I just don't know where we're at in terms of those folks that we have. If we're talking 2 employees, if we're talking 20.
And it sounds like if that's a viable option, we can do some deep diving into that, and I can look at the impact on how many staff it would impact and give you a better cost projection.
Can you do it by department as well? So we can see what departments get more help versus others? Like if there's public works, we notice that it's going to help public works quite a bit. We know which departments it's going to be. Or if there was like, maybe we hired 5 years ago when the market was doing well, maybe public works is feeling a little underfunded, so that way we can at least see what departments they're coming from.
My only other thought, and this may be making something more complicated than it needs to be, is can we do this in phases? And do we target those jobs that are more than 5% below market this year? And so the folks that are, that are more undercompensated, and then address the rest of the staff next year. I don't know how complicated that would be, but would we have a better sense? Is the economy going to rebound? Are we going to be in a better financial position? All of those things. Does it make sense to look at doing this in 2 different phases? I don't know.
You can certainly phase out, with represented staff, like in negotiations, we'll do market adjustments and do 5% this year and then another 5% the following year, just to offset costs. With the ultimate target of, X amount or X percentage. So that's common. So we can split it however you would like, if that's something you would like to see, or some options on phasing.
I would say it's not as common with non-representatives because next council changes, next budget season. You aren't necessarily following the same rules as you are with the contracted. That makes sense.
So do the numbers get skewed though? Obviously they will from this year to next year based upon what we decide for a COLA increase and the other market cities, right? So then do we have true new numbers to be able to
That
phase
makes
in
sense.
next
Yeah,
year?
no, it's a
I
good
mean,
point.
it gets real complicated real
It's
quick,
too-
right?
Yeah, more
Yeah.
difficult than it needs to be.
Yeah.
And so far, what we're hearing is that they are going at the high end. The majority of our comparable or sister cities are going at the higher end. So we're likely to start falling further behind.
I guess one other question, I like Councilmember Jorstad's comment on the, do we know how many people currently are more than 5% below market rate of the 49 positions, or 55, whatever that is? now?
28.
28.
28 out of the 49 are below 5% of the 50th percentile. So it would just go up from there.
In the past, council has preferred the city to stay above, closer to the 75th percentile. I know that's very difficult in this economy and with the money that we have, but I know that's something that we have talked about in the past, and so it's good to reevaluate that. Look at where council would prefer to sit in comparison to your comparable cities.
So since we don't want to talk about it all night, why don't we get the extra data? And then that way we can see where we're at.
I do want to talk about all night markets.
Yeah, you're gonna get more information on the 4th, and you guys can kind of digest this and then really look at it again on the 4th, I think.
I think the numbers are important, because of our budget, but I'm always looking for the high end. So that's what I always start at that end and come down. I don't go from low to go high. So I'm interested in the 75th percentile to start with, but that's just me. So 1 of 7.
It didn't show that forecast, but it does take us into more than $1 million negative in 2029. We go with the 75th percentile.
Let's do it.
Yeah,
exactly.
So we cut a few directors and we're fine, right?
So that's kind of one reason we started with 60. We thought, well, I'm not sure if 70 is gonna go.
Well, this information is super helpful. It's helpful to have the numbers and have the data.
Right.
Thanks to both Shannon and Kathy for being here and providing this information. And I look forward to some more data to go with it. Conversation.
So I'm hearing that the 60th percentile and the 75th are both of interest. Would you not want to look at the 50th anymore? That would help us when we're manipulating data. We don't have to manipulate it 4 times, 3, 12 times. Just, if that's okay, or would you still like to see more of the 50th percentile data?
Mark, so you more toward, you said 50, 60. I'm kind of in the 50, 60 myself, so I don't know where I sit with that.
I think 50 takes us down below what's going on in the market.
I think 60th puts us in the middle.
60th and 75th is what I'm interested in.
Right.
50th takes us, is
Me
making
too.
us drop back faster.
Yes, me too.
So it sounds like we have, we can cross off the 50.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you, because it helps us so as we're manipulating the spreadsheet.
Anya, do you have everything you need?
Yes. Kathy, Shannon, did you have any follow-up to anything, or do we have what we need?
On the 75th, do we want to look at years in position on that as well? So we're looking at basically all jobs, modeling the years in position, using the 60th percentile and the 75th percentile.
Yes.
And doing a deep dive on that.
And I believe probably keep the other options open. I probably want to look at the other options as well. Okay, for now. Years of service, the other implementation options.
I agree.
I agree.
I know Councilmember Jorstad had asked about the bringing people to 5%, so the people who are under or more than 5%, that 28 people, did we want to look at that?
I don't know. It sounds complicated. Let's just look at the whole, let's look at the whole thing first, and then if that continues to seem relevant, then we can go there if we need to.
Okay,
Great.
thank you, Council.
All right, great. Thank you, Anya. Thank you, Shannon, and Kathy. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All right, let's move forward to the consent agenda. We're on item number 7, consent agenda. Can I get a motion to pass the consent agenda, please?
Move to approve. Sorry, move to pass the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to pass consent agenda. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the consent agenda passes, and we'll move forward to item 8, action items, which is Lake Stevens Food Bank funding agreement. Barb.
Thank you. Let me take this over here. I just wanted to bring this back forward. So last week, council approved the funding request from the food bank to provide $500,000 to the food bank for the building and construction. At that same meeting, the president of the food bank came back and asked for an additional amount of $450,000. They brought forth their costs and their funding sources. Since the agreement has not yet been finalized, it was approved by council, but it hasn't been finalized and signed. If council does wish to increase that amount, we don't need to bring forward an amendment. We can just go ahead and change that amount. So I did include in the packet an amended or a revised agreement that just changes the amount from the 500,000 to the 950, and there were no other changes in that. Additionally, we wanted to recognize the partnership that the city of Lake Stevens has had with the food bank over the years. And so we included a chronology of our support and partnership. And it goes back to, at this point, the 2016, when we allowed the food bank to utilize the Eagle Ridge Park. We surplused and entered into a purchase and sale agreement for the property they're currently on at a below market rate. That was so that we had the public benefit of having the central location for the food bank and in consideration of retaining the space for the community, social services and other public purposes. This year, we did go back and recently extend the agreement and covenant to extend the date as it was about to expire, allowing them to have a couple more years to actually finish the building and the community space. And then just noted that we did help them to secure the project funding from the state legislature that they utilized for phase 1. That was their site preparation. And then we did provide some CARES funding in the amount of $10,000. And then the current agreement that council approved for the $500,000. In your packet, we did also include the original real estate purchase and sale agreement that has the covenants that they are required to stick with and that we are required to abide by in order to continue with this partnership. And then additionally, the food bank provided a letter regarding the phase 1 costs, as well as some additional information regarding their grant, how they utilize their grant, the reimbursement for the grant, as well as an updated floor plan that calls out where our community spaces are. And then also I included the presentation materials from last week so that you have it all in one place. So Sofina Nunez, the president of the food bank, is here. If you have any questions, additional questions for her. If you do approve this, we will take that as a part of the pandemic recovery. So we would increase the amount from the pandemic recovery funds. It would come from the amount that you have not quite allocated yet of that 2.9 million. So we'll take it out of that if you do approve this.
So I understand that the food bank just received word that they're going to get some money for a community kitchen, training kitchen. Is that correct?
The teaching kitchen, yeah.
So can you go to the microphone?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, yeah, the Rotary has committed $25,000 towards the teaching vision. That is on the budget sheets that I did send to you. So it's included in the money that we had informed you about. They are raising money for more, as are we.
Okay, thank you.
Sabrina, is the county matching this 450?
The county is working on an additional $250,000.
Do you have a timeline as to when you'll know about the county funds?
I do not.
Okay.
Good. I could return a response to you as soon as I can.
It's okay. I think county budget's usually not final till end of November, so beginning of December, I'm guessing. It's not possible to get up for sure before then, but I don't, it would be nice to know if you will or won't know before the county budget's final.
Well, I for one have been in favor of doing this. We've been working on this for years, and it just needs to get done so we can facilitate the families that are in need in Lake Stevens, which have grown over the years. I happen to have a little bit of an inside knowledge on this because Debbie works down at the food bank 3 days a week, and so she's telling me everything that's going on down there. I do have a few misgivings about some things I hear, but other than that, it's to get this done and operational along with the community services phase of the building, which would help immensely in other areas that are not being served that well right now. So I'm in favor of doing this. And you know, we have the one-time money to help us along. I don't think it's really affecting our budget that much. I mean, it's $450,000. I get it, but we need to get this thing done.
I feel like this is what those pandemic recovery funds are for. Folks in our community who were most impacted by the pandemic, by the loss of employment. So I also am supportive of moving forward. Can I
speak to that?
Mhm.
Because in this community, when we have an impact of the pandemic with COVID, with our elderly, and now with inflation, with our young families, I mean, we're the ones that are serving everybody. We're the ones that are providing them extra gift cards so that they can go to the grocery store. We're getting them diapers. We're getting them formula when we had the formula shortage. I mean, it's the food bank that's providing all of that. I mean, they're working with the community members that are donating, but we're also taking the income that we have and we're purchasing food so that we can provide for the community. We also want to allow the people to come to a space so that we can have, meetings, the Veterans Commission, so that the VOA will have that ability to serve in our community, because we're getting those phone calls now. I mean, I don't know how many Facebook messages I get at 10, 11 o'clock at night asking, how do I pay my rent? Who can I connect with for school clothes? How do we, connect with the food drives, the clothing drives? We're getting those calls and we're handling them. That's what we want to do. But this is not just something that, we're saying, oh, well, the food bank just needs all this money. I mean, it's a project that seems expensive, but in comparison to something like the Imagine Children's Museum, what's that, $20 million for that project? And then BOA is putting in a $10 million project in Linwood, and we're asking for a total of $4 million. And we've already used $1 million, and that's with in-kind donations. So we've worked really, really hard to make this very expensive project very, very cheap. Not even affordable, cheap. I mean, we are hammering all of our subcontractors, asking them to just give. So I do appreciate all of the partnership that the city has made with us. I mean, it's we wouldn't do this, and that's our job, right? To work with the city, to work with the community. But it's a really huge giving back to the community for small amount of money in the big picture of things.
The other point I think that you bring up is much of the support that's being provided is prevention. And it's very well documented that prevention is much less expensive than paying for crisis after the fact and dealing with folks that have already lost their job, have already lost their home. And the ability to be able to continue to prevent crises for family is going to be financially beneficial and just benefit our community in the long run.
So statistics show that that's a fact.
What's the motion we need to make?
We make a motion to,
I move to revise, is that what we're after, is revising the last? I move to make the revision as noted.
To 950,000.
Yeah, to add the 450 to the 500, so not to a revision of $950,000.
Motion.
okay, so just to clarify, the motion that's on the table is take action on the request for additional funding made by Lake Stevens Community, that's not right. Okay, so the motion on the table is to increase the grant agreement to the Lake Stevens Community Food Bank from 500,000 to 950,000. Does that sound correct?
That's what I said.
That's exactly.
That's exactly what I said.
That's what I heard.
That's what I said.
Excellent.
And that's what she said.
Thank you. And we have a second.
And I even had my hearing aid. And we have a second on that. Do we have any discussion?
I guess I don't have a discussion. I just comment. And I just am grateful for the current and former council members, community members, and members of the food bank and city staff that have worked tirelessly to make this happen. It's really a culmination of many years of effort. And I'm grateful that we're seeing this project come to completion in a timely manner. And I just want to concur with Councilmember Jorstad. That is the intent of the pandemic relief funds, to affect those that were disproportionately impacted. So I feel like these funds are being used judiciously and for the intent for which they were given.
With that, all those in favor?
Aye.
And any opposed? All right, sounds great. Good job.
Thank you.
Bank.
Get to work.
All right, with that, let's go to discussion item 9A, storage facilities code amendment. Jill, you are up.
Okay.
Good evening, everybody. I have a brief PowerPoint tonight. Let me get that up and running for you guys. Okay. Okay. Good evening, everybody. Today we're bringing back the storage facilities code amendment. We have a draft prepared and we're hoping to gather your feedback before we go ahead and bring it back to Planning Commission for a public hearing. So just to recap, it has been a couple months since we introduced this code amendment on July 12th. Later on in the summer in August, we had a work session with the Planning Commission in which we presented the first draft to them. So we incorporated a couple of their suggestions and have since added a few refinements of our own, in which I will discuss in further detail. So this is just a map that I wanted to include in the presentation again. It's just based on some info that I pulled from Google, which shows that we have 9 existing storage facilities and 1 proposed. We have got 5 already in the industrial area, that's the blue area. 2 in the Lake Stevens Center area near Safeway and Target. And then we've got 1 up by Soper Hill, and then we have the StoreQuest facility, which is the newest one off of 204. So the pending development is on the corner of Highway 92 and Grade Road there. So the existing, next slide. So here are just some highlights from the draft, which is also attached in attachment 1. Previously, the storage specific performance standards had applied only to the local business zoning district. However, we're proposing that the new code would be applicable to all of the zones in which storage facilities are allowed. So the code would also require storage facilities to be multi-story, which is pretty in line with what the market is doing and what other cities nearby are also requiring. The only exception there would be for vehicle storage areas. We also make an effort to include, boat storage and of course other vehicle storage areas, and to really have a definition that differentiates that from, your typical short-term parking lot type use. And so also lastly, it also breaks different types of storage facilities into categories. So there are 3 of them. So they're going to be standalone, vertical mixed use, and then horizontal mixed use. So here's kind of an example of the standalone concept. This is mainly what we have in the city right now. Some are older single-story buildings, and then some are more like this one or the StoreQuest one that are multi-story. So these would not be allowed in the local business zoning district at all. And for a standalone development, the code would limit the storage development to 50% of the gross site area. And then, so we've also got here the horizontal mixed use concept. So this would be similar to what you would find in like a strip mall or even like an outdoor mall area. And the storage use would have to be located, behind some of the other uses that are there. So in the new draft code, the storage building, it would have to be like away from the right of way. And then similar to the standalone development, it would also limit the storage development total area to 50% gross site area. And then lastly, we have the vertical mixed use concept, which is pretty similar to like a 5/1 or a 3/1, except that instead of residential units, you would have the storage units on top of the retail, store, restaurant, or whatever other allowed use is allowed in the zone. And the requirement here would be that the non-storage use would just have to comprise at least 30% of the total floor area. So that's kind of it for the highlights of the code. I know that Planning Manager Levitan wanted to discuss some Urban 3 results as part of this code amendment, so I will pass it off to him.
Thanks, Jill. Yeah, if you can move it on to this one. So we just wanted to bring back a little bit of analysis. When we talked about this back in July, there was some request for some data in addition to how many facilities we had, just how much area they take up, what the property taxes and any other income or taxes that are generated for the city. So this slide basically shows specifically for use code 638 from the county, that the city has 6 facilities. There are another couple that utilize another use code, but we had gotten this data specifically for this use code. In the city, the average is about one of these parcels or facilities for every 6,700 residents. And when you look at countywide, it's about 1 per every 7,500 residents. So I think there were some questions as far as whether the city was underserved or overserved. This is only a comparison to the county. This isn't a comparison to what the market demand is. So there may still be higher market demand both at the citywide and the countywide level, but we wanted to have a comparison to the kind of the level of service, at least at the county level. When you look at that average, the average value per acre for this use code, in the city, it's a little bit higher. There are some newer uses, some newer kind of multi-story structures, more so than we have in the city. So that generates about 1.7 million per acre in the county, compared to about 1.1 million per acre in the city. The caveat that there are a couple of newer ones, including StoreQuest, that wasn't included in use code 638. When I quickly added that in, it raised the value to about 1.4 million, but we would still be lower than what the countywide average is. And a lot of that is due to some of the older single-story facilities that can have kind of very low value per acre, as low as $200,000, versus some of the newer ones. There were examples that Urban 3 had provided, and Bothell and in Everett, that were upwards of $6, $8, $10, $12 million per multiple stories in these structures, and it just resulted in a much higher building value.
Can I pause on that? So just as a reminder for council, when we're talking about value per acre, that's not an assessed or an appraised value. That's a methodology to assess the likelihood that there's more increased economic development if it's developed in a certain way and that it's acting in a more synergistic manner. So again, it's not an actual property value. It's a methodology to determine the likelihood of it bringing more economic value to the community or that area as a whole. So just wanted to make that distinction, that those aren't actual assessed values, but the tax summaries of the examples are based on real tax value.
Just like that survey we had where he went through and showed purple areas and so forth. We're just trying to, if you have a 1-story like a toy garage, it doesn't drive as much value as a 3-story in use.
Correct.
So we're not using the highest and best use for some of our properties, and seeing that we don't have a whole lot, we need to look at that.
Correct.
And so we did want to do a couple of real world cases. So we looked at the 3 newest storage facilities in the city. The Clock Tower, which is primarily single story, versus the StoreQuest, which is a multiple story. So if you actually look at the city property taxes that are collected, so 92 cents per $1,000 of assessed value. The assessed value of StoreQuest is much, much higher, just given that it is kind of a more efficient use of the land and a larger building per area. So even though the site is about 1/3 of that of the Clock Tower site, the property taxes collected by the city are actually more. So it's about 350% higher amount of property taxes per acre that are collected by the city. And that's just a reflection of the utilization of the land, that it is a more efficient use of the property by going vertical. Jill, if you can move on to the next slide. David. Yeah.
Sorry, I've got a quick question. The one on 92 and Grade Road, do we have a valuation for that one, an expected valuation on that?
I do not believe we have an expected valuation. We don't typically get that, at least at the land use stage. That's not kind of in any of the criteria that we evaluate.
Okay.
And so this just kind of elaborates on some of the information from the previous slide, and specifically related to property taxes and value per acre. Just showing that once you start to go vertical, that there definitely is a big difference as far as potential for increased economic activity, and then in turn, property taxes that are generated. Go ahead to the next one, Joe. And then, yeah, as Jill noted at the beginning of the presentation, the Planning Commission did review this back on August 3rd. They were generally pretty comfortable with it. They provided some feedback to staff that's been incorporated into the draft that is included as attachment 1 tonight. So before we move on to the public hearing stage for the Planning Commission and for them to make a recommendation to City Council, we did want to make sure that we got any council feedback before we moved on to next steps. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, as is Jill and Russ, and we appreciate your feedback.
I have a question. Given the employment goals that we have in our city, in our plan, and the designs that both the horizontal mixed and the vertical mixed designs that would include opportunities for retail and employment, why would we consider a standalone option?
Yeah, I mean, that is a good question. That's something that we can consider. So we did propose on within the local business where the sites tend to be a little bit smaller and where kind of the comprehensive plan points so that it should be more kind of a local focus, community oriented focus for those business centers. That was why we had proposed to not allow the standalone facilities within those. From the perspective of the city's projected employment deficit over the next 20 years, there is a case to be made that maybe we shouldn't be allowing them. We did want to balance that with the rights of property owners. So we wanted to evaluate that and we wanted to offer that option to council. If council does want to go in that direction, that's something that we can explore or we're happy to evaluate a whole bunch of different scenarios right now.
Thank you. I feel like since I've been on council, we've had a fair amount of conversation around the pros and cons of having additional storage units in our city. And there tend to be very few pros in my recollection. And so the standalone option seems to sort of push all those buttons that we're trying to avoid, I guess, in my perspective and in my recollection. So I appreciate the feedback. Thank you.
Jill, can you go back to the slide that you showed the multi-use example? So when we look at a multi-use, this is kind of intriguing to me. When you look at a multi-use property like that, what does that mean for parking? When you do storage over something like that, what's the parking requirement for that? It increases or decreases the parking lot space?
Yeah, so it depends. If it's a vertical mixed use, I mean, we would need to kind of, it depends how defined their uses are at the land use stage, similar to how we evaluate traffic impacts kind of based on what's proposed at the land use stage. And then there might need to be some refinements in the future. The same would be said for parking. We would probably want to be more conservative as far as projecting kind of worst case scenario. If a bunch of restaurants went in that have high parking rates, we would want to take a cumulative assessment of the entire site's need for parking. So combining retail shops, restaurant, the storage would probably be the lowest as far as the parking demand on a site like that.
Right.
So you are, whether you do it through it kind of depends on the mechanism that you're utilizing as well. Are you creating a binding site plan with the storage facility kind of off on its own and has a dedicated amount of parking? Is it treated as a whole site? So it kind of depends, but we would evaluate that at the planning stage and we'll probably want to kind of project what the overall demand is.
And then would you also require an access like off the back? I don't think you'd want to have a U-Haul backing up to the Chipotle, right?
Yes.
Unload our stuff.
So and and there are a lot of interesting designs. I found a couple of additional ones, especially within the vertical mixed use, where they kind of have almost like a courtyard where you can kind of drive into the middle. And there's an area like for loading and all of that, so that you're obviously kind of have the ground floor retail and restaurants lining around maybe half the building on one side. And then there's kind of an open area, kind of essentially a corridor to get in and to provide better access to the storage facility. And they're kind of very complex ones where you can even get up to a second story with a vehicle. There are ones that do internal storage via an elevator. We may not be quite at that stage yet, but they're essentially like car lifts and things like that.
I would like to speak up to going up rather than out. We have such limited land to build on here. And I'm always looking across at Jay's Market and all those little stores and thinking, what if we put apartments above them? What if we put apartments above Frontier Village, Frontier? I mean, we could. There's nothing in our restrictions that would stop that. And it would allow people to live here. And it also would bring business to the people below them immediately. I just think of young people and young families and how fabulous it would be for them to be right there. Just wanted to throw that out. We haven't talked about that at all, but just put that out there for you to consider. And thank you for your hard work.
New reconfiguration of these regulations would be requiring a two-story kind of minimum, so they would all be multi-story structures. Again, that whole idea that Councilmember Tagent brought up before he left is just how do you increase the value of each property? And as Councilmember Jorstad pointed out, we do have diminishing amount of buildable land, so we have to be extremely efficient in at least the rules, you know, that we're proposing to the council. And in this case, a series of options that again protect sort of private development rights, but also take into consideration our valuable limited resource that's remaining. So,
right. Thank you.
Has the developer for the Grade Road site provided a plan of what type of storage they're proposing or wanting?
Yeah, so their idea is just to provide, you know, general mini storage. I don't think that there's a vehicle storage component or anything like that in that proposal.
Has that proposal been accepted yet?
Not at this time.
Okay, thank you.
David, could you clarify on the bottom of page 175, section 2, where it states standalone and horizontal mixed-use storage facilities and their appurtenances shall be limited in size to 50% of the gross site area? Why would you have a standalone and a horizontal mixed-use storage facility limited in size? The same limitation in size.
I mean, that primarily was to serve as an incentive to at least provide the horizontal mixed use. If you go horizontal mixed use, you can use 50% for the storage and its appurtenances, and you can use kind of the rest of the site for the other uses. Whereas a standalone facility, you would not be able to utilize the whole site, and that's kind of intended to be an economic incentive to try to encourage someone to either at least go horizontal mixed use or potentially to go vertical mixed use.
Right, but you're treating them as the same. So why wouldn't you increase the horizontal mixed use to maybe 60 or 70% of the site to encourage somebody to do that? I mean, right now, the way it's written, the size limitation is the same for a standalone and a horizontal mixed use facility. So,
well, because if you go horizontal mixed use, you're at 50% that can be utilized the same for just the storage, which is the same as the standalone, but then you would be able to develop the remainder of the site with other uses.
But doesn't it get back to the point of trying to color some properties purple, where you would have a mixed use facility worth more than a standalone facility?
Yeah, I guess I'm kind of.
So what would you be suggesting for a different percentile then? Would you be wanting to see less area devoted to storage facilities in both scenarios, or in one scenario?
No, wait a minute, you just confused the heck out of me.
You know, the way this reads, it doesn't, in the case of the horizontal mixed use story, unless I'm missing something here, it's not proportioning what the storage facility versus the mixed use capabilities are to be, whether it's 30-70, 50-50, 40-60. You're just treating the standalone and the horizontal mixed use consistent, I guess. And if we're trying to encourage maximization of property from a value standpoint, it would seem like you would want to incentivize somebody to do a mixed use versus a standalone.
So increase the
So-
storage facility portion on a vertical mixed use beyond 50%. standalone would have a lower, we'll say Florida area ratio. That's at least a percentile of the property could be generally equitable in a horizontal mixed use, but if it's in a vertical mixed use, to incentivize the mixed use portion, that would maybe have 30% of the site, and the storage facility above behind would be 70%.
Yeah, something along those lines. Yeah.
We can work with the math. It's just, again, just trying to present sort of a menu of options tonight. All of these can be defined.
Okay, so I'm still confused over this. I think I understand what you're saying, but I think it relies on another question here for me. If we're limiting it inside, it doesn't matter. I don't care if we're talking about standalone or horizontal mixed. What we're saying right now, you're limited to 50% use of the property for one of those two types of buildings. But that doesn't take away the fact that you can use the other 50% for something else.
Correct.
Okay, got it. Now I understand. I thought the way I read it is you're limited to using only 50% of your property.
For that one particular use.
Okay, I didn't read it that way. I read it, that's all you can use it for. So now I tend to agree with what Gary's saying about that is if we're going to incentivize using the rest of the property for mixed use, for instance, then it would behoove us to limit a little bit more of the storage facilities. Trying to keep in mind that some people want to develop their properties the way they want to develop them. But we still have development agreements in our rules, so whatever we set.
I'm still stuck. I can't understand why we would craft an ordinance that would even allow standalone storage at this point, given everything we know about what we need in our city.
Well, here's what I think would happen. If we don't have a way of doing standalone, and there's a piece of property that's too small to do both, you're not gonna be able to have anybody come in and you're not gonna have the money to be able to develop it properly on a really small plot of land.
Not develop storage property, but then maybe that property needs to be developed differently.
Maybe, but if the owner wants to develop it for a standalone storage unit, that's what he wants to do. Based on the footprint of the property, then limiting somebody, I think we're getting off into limiting somebody to be able to use their property the way they want to.
Well, but I think that we're responsible for sort of the big picture of the
Sure.
city and its trajectory. And
Right.
if somebody wants to develop their property in a way that that goes against our sub-area plan, our comprehensive plan, the kind of what we need to happen in our city, then I think that's our purview, right? I think that's our responsibility.
Well, I can't disagree with what you're saying about that, but I also like to be able to give people choices. And I don't think that the standalone I don't think leaving the standalone in there really hurts us that bad for what we have left.
I disagree.
Well, we can do that.
Yeah, we can disagree. Okay.
David, are storage facilities allowed in unincorporated Snohomish County?
I would need to look at their use matrix. I know that I've seen them because they're up and down Highway 99 in the area that is unincorporated. I don't know if those are legal non-conforming or if those are conforming to the current use code, but I can do that research.
I'm curious what you're thinking.
In general, I can respond to that. So we did the annexation a few years ago with the industrial area. Yes, storage facilities were allowed use in that unincorporated area that we just annexed. So just like the city, it's going to vary by zone. So yeah, there is a lot of limitations. We just talked about Highway 99. There are definitely other structures down Maltby, off of Highway 9, Clearview area, 522. So there are lots of these types of facilities throughout unincorporated areas.
It was kind of, I guess, leading into answering your question a little bit in the sense that I don't think outside of Lake Stevens UGA, there's any area in proximity that has the ability to do storage facilities. And I guess it was kind of leading to if we were to go your route, then there is an alternative, I guess. The problem with the storage facility, there's such a demand for these things. I mean, we're doing 4,000 square foot lots. People have stuff, and you can't get your stuff in a house that has a 2,200 square foot with a 2-car garage. That's why you got all the cars sitting on the streets. All their stuff is out there.
I'd love to have a conversation about the sociology of stuff.
Yeah, well,
That's
probably
for another time.
That's
human
above- that's
nature,
above our
but
pay grade.
Agreed. I
I
totally
mean,
know.
so there is a demand for them. And if you tried to rent one of these facilities, you'll find out real quick, there's a huge demand for these things.
My wife's trying to get me to get rid of one of the 2 we have, and I'm trying to hold on to it because I wouldn't be able to get another.
Yep.
So I guess, to get away from that standalone is the incentive to encourage somebody to do more than just allocating their property to a standalone storage facility.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I'm
No, that makes
going,
sense.
I guess.
I think the mixed use option to me is a win-win. We're meeting the demand that exists because of stuff. We're providing opportunities for retail and other employment. So so that's why I struggle with there even being a standalone option. Right now
Well,
in our city, given what we.
Yeah, personally, I'd rather give somebody an incentive to, drive them that direction versus prohibition and say, you can't do this. So, because I do think it kind of gets over to what Kim's talking about. If they're in a particular zone and that's allowed, and then all of a sudden we prohibit that, we'd have to amend all our comp plans and zoning codes and everything to comply with that, correct? So.
But to go along with Angie's point, I would much rather see that than a standalone second floor. Right?
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with
Yeah. So how do we incentivize that versus a standalone?
I'd rather see the other mixed use one instead of a vertical mixed use concept. That's what I'd rather see. I mean, if you go back, if you would, Jill, go back to.
With the palm trees.
With the palm trees there.
That was a local.
Someplace in Arizona. That's what I would rather see. I mean, if you had a 2-story storage facility behind, I guess you could call it a strip mall, which is what Jill, I think, said. I'd much rather see that.
I feel like that it takes up a lot more land that we don't have.
It might, yeah, I think you're correct, but
I
bar that than having a mixed use facility like the other picture, then, okay, I get it. I do. I mean, there's several of them in the area now, like in Snohomish and things like that, but they're not using storage or putting apartments above them, but still.
Right.
I'd rather see apartments above them besides storage, really.
Oh, yeah.
Our housing stock.
Sure, absolutely.
But like Gary said, there is a need for storage, so I don't know.
I don't know. I'd have to be convinced to approve a change that would continue to allow standalones. That's just my own.
I haven't heard from you, and then I might try to summarize what I've heard from the council.
No, I appreciate the discussion, and I am pondering the 3 main points that I've heard, and I agree with elements of all 3 of those. And so I think the one that incentivizing, like Gary said, I prefer the route of incentivizing versus prohibiting. That would be my preference. to provide some incentive. And with regard to limited land, I find myself in a conundrum between property rights and properly managing the very limited resources we have. So if there's a way to incentivize a vertical mixed use option, I think that would be desirable.
Thank you for that summary. Those are the main points that I heard. I heard a strong preference for a vertical mixed use, a secondary preference for a horizontal mixed use, and then lukewarm acceptance of standalone and opposition. And I think maybe in the presentation, we could present it in that manner in priority. The city gives first preference to this design, and here's the incentive, and we can come up with some metrics to create that incentive. The secondary, which would be sort of the horizontal, here are your incentives. And then I think to find the balance with standalones, and it's already sort of started that we've already said would not be allowed in the local business. I think council could take a stronger look at that and decide if you were to allow standalone, what zoning districts are that appropriate? My mind goes to the industrial district where it's sort of been a traditional use to have facilities like that. And in commercial districts, whether it's local business, commercial, central business district, you say it has to be mixed use, has to have another component. But we do have areas in the city that you could contemplate standalone. So that's, would be your options through zoning controls.
Well, I would appreciate seeing it that way.
Can you restate that?
I would appreciate seeing it how you just stated to bring it back to us.
Okay.
So Russ, is that enough for the planning commission to move that forward for the public hearing? Okay.
They were supportive of the kind of option of menu. So thank you for helping refine what those look like.
Thank you, Jill.
Yeah, great work, Jill.
Thank you.
Good work, staff. Let's keep moving forward here. We need, I should say, Caitlin, who is off of probation today. She's been with us for a year.
Thank you. I made
Not
it.
off until midnight. So it's her opportunity to shine and ask some questions of the council, reference the council retreat.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I have a brief presentation in anticipation of your winter 2023 council retreat. I have researched some venue options and wanted to present that general information to you this evening and get some feedback so that I can go in a more directed path. I looked at several properties spanning all the way from SeaTac to Bellingham, and I included options that were an overnight option. I also looked at ones that were just day rental spaces, and I used some very general terms that can obviously be adjusted or updated once we get an agenda put together and some more specific details. So you have the list of different properties that I explored. There's a spreadsheet that details the dollar amounts and everything that is included in each different property. And then I looked at a general date of February 3rd to the 4th, but that was mainly just looking end of January, beginning of February. Approximately 25 attendees. Again, that would depend on who was presenting, what was on the agenda. And I also let each property know that we are subject to the OPMA so that there'd be space for the public to come and observe. I looked into catering and meeting rental spaces law, as well as AV support for an all-day event Friday and a partial Saturday, which is what we did this last January. And this was kind of the starting point quote that I got from each location. And again, I can explore more, but this was just to kind of start the conversation off and put me in a direction of, do you want to stay local? Do you want to have an overnight? What are the elements that you're looking for in the retreat that you are going to have in around that time frame in early 2023? So I would be welcome to answer any questions and love feedback from the group.
Is there a reason why we always schedule these at the end or the beginning of the month?
None that I've been given, and I could definitely look at the middle. That's an option as well.
Okay, I would request you do that.
Okay.
What's your request?
Just maybe a mid-month option or something. I guess I know there's some construction people in the room that tend to have busy times at the end of the month.
So.
Mhm.
At the end of the month.
Are you tired nodding your head or are you nodding your
My
head?
head is correct. It's hard to
Okay.
do at the end of the month.
So does council feel inclined to go away a little further than usual, or do we want to stay close?
You know, the point has been made in the past that if we're away from the area, people tend to be more engaged. They're not pulled out of meetings quite as easily with things that might come up that they want to attend to locally. So
The last one you had a lame excuse with Councilmember Frederick that stepped away because of
Some
some COVID thing.
pandemic or something. I
Yeah.
don't remember. Yeah, so I tend to lean a little bit more towards an overnight out of county. But
I would concur with that as well. I appreciated the 1 year that we did do the out of town, just the time to mingle, I guess, in both formally and business and then off the clock as well. And we haven't with the 2 years of doing Zoom, we didn't really get a chance to have that type of interaction. And I think that's, it's time to rebuild some of that connection as people, and as a council.
Is there a preference for north or south, or would you rather have me grab a couple more properties that are overnight based and then show that
In my
comparison?
opinion, Seattle's out of the question.
Anything north, anything going south is undesirable.
Got
I
it.
do
Just for
everything I
traffic.
can to stay out of Seattle. And I'm not wanted there or anything. but, you know, it's just-
Okay, we won't look into that.
I just don't want to be in Seattle.
Did you say south?
That's just-
Yeah, anything north.
So one of the properties was the Chrysalis,
I have
which
a
is
comment
north.
about the
Okay.
Chrysalis.
All right.
Love the Chrysalis, been there many times, one of my favorite places, and people should know, there's a train track that runs directly outside of the back of the hotel, between the hotel and the water, also beautiful water views. But if you are a light sleeper, it does run at night.
If you do not
Or
want to be
early,
in
early in the
Chrysalis at
morning,
night.
and
Keep that in mind.
yeah.
It is a great place, but the train does wake you up. Because when she says it's behind, she means like. 3
It's like
feet
right,
behind.
it's like right here, yeah, you
3
can
feet
feel it, but if you have an extra melatonin, you're probably fine.
That's what you're.
Yeah, add that in the budget.
I'll put that in my list.
But Caitlin, if you just had other options to go with that, anything that's north,
Okay.
I think an overnight option in the middle of the month, that's north, that would allow the staff to attend. Gary, do you have a preference as far as January or February? Kim, is there a preference?
Nope.
So I would,
Slight February preference, but
what's that?
I have a slight mid-February preference over mid-January, but
I do as well. I have a military school, I'll be gone in mid-January.
it'd be good to have you there.
There you go.
So you're mid-February, you said?
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, good enough, guy, good enough, guy?
Yep, that's great. Thank you so much.
Okay. And last but not least, Ms. Challen with the draft agenda.
Right. So I apologize that I don't have a handout for you tonight, but Caitlin's going to pull this up on the screen. So we are meeting again 2 weeks from tonight. No council meeting next week since several of you will be in Washington DC. So this is the agenda for October 4th. Given it's a couple weeks out, it may change a little bit, but here's what we've got slated for now. A Frontier Heights Phase 2 report under City Department report. We'll have another sergeant promotion for Adam Bryant. A presentation on Lake Stevens Industrial Center. We're going to introduce our new city engineer, Kim. And then for discussion, we'll have short-term rentals. This is your continuation from the last discussion. And I understood that to be a discussion item and that action would be the following meeting since this is technically a workshop. But if I'm mistaken on that, let me know. We talked tonight about staffing and wages, so we'll have a more in-depth 2023 budget discussion as it relates to that, and also Parks and Recreation priorities. So a time for council to discuss some priorities for that new department. That's what I've got slated for now. Just wanted to share that.
Will we want to have time just to talk about the conference that we're going to? Would this be a good time to do that, or will we want?
Like a recap?
After we come
Yeah.
back?
Yeah.
To recap it?
Yeah.
Sure.
Or is this too soon? We need time to digest. Yeah, maybe just a
Good idea.
informal
A good
summary of
Yeah.
what we.
Yeah. I think that's good.
I'll add
good
that.
time.
Scooters in the street. and stuff.
That is a pretty hefty agenda.
Yeah.
So bring
It is.
snacks.
Kelly, could you send that out, please?
Absolutely, yes.
I can't write as fast as you talk. so.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I can't write as fast as you talk.
Okay. I would be happy to.
And before I ask for an adjourn, I would like to thank the council for being a community-oriented, worries about our city council and is deliberate thinking and does work that is focused on getting the city better. As I see other councils around us, I don't often see that. And so I actually enjoy working with the council because I know you guys focus on the city and not your personal issues, and I like that. So with that, may I get a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We adjourn.